There is a moment that exists between worlds. It happens somewhere in the darkness when the night is at its deepest, and the morning has not yet decided to arrive. You know this moment. You have lived it more times than you can count. Your eyes open suddenly, completely as if someone has called your name from across a vast empty room. The house is silent. The street is silent. Even the air feels like it is holding its breath. And there you are, suspended in that strange space between 3 and 5 in the morning, utterly awake when every cell in your body should be sleeping. You reach for your phone. The numbers glow back at you. 3:47. Or maybe 4:12. Or maybe it is that heavy hour of 3:33 that seems to carry a weight you cannot explain. And in that moment, something stirs inside you. Not anxiety exactly. Not fear. Something older. Something that feels like it has been waiting for you to be still enough, quiet enough, alone enough to finally speak. I have studied the human psyche for many years now, and I can tell you with complete certainty that what happens to you in those pre-dawn hours is not random. It is not insomnia in the clinical sense. It is not merely a biological glitch or a blood sugar fluctuation, though the rational mind will desperately try to convince you that it is. What is happening in those hours is something far more significant. Your unconscious mind has chosen the only moment when you are finally quiet enough to listen, and it has something important to tell you. Carl Jung understood this phenomenon in ways that modern sleep science still struggles to articulate. He recognized that the hours between 3 and 5 in the morning occupy a unique position in the cycle of human consciousness. The Chinese called this the hour of the lungs, the time when grief and sadness are said to be processed by the body. The mystics called it the hour of the soul, when the veil between the conscious and unconscious grows thin enough to see through. Jung saw it as something even more profound. He saw it as the time when the self attempts to communicate with the ego, when the deeper layers of your psyche rise to the surface, because your defenses have finally, temporarily, fallen away. If you are someone who wakes during these hours, if you find yourself staring at ceilings in the darkness while the world sleeps around you, I need you to understand something that might change the way you experience those moments forever. You are not broken. You are being called. The pattern of waking between 3 and 5 is often the first sign that something within you is demanding attention. Something you have pushed away. Something you have buried. Something you have outgrown but refused to release. The unconscious does not operate on your schedule. It does not care that you have a meeting at 9 or that you need 8 hours of sleep to function. It cares only about one thing, and that is your wholeness. And when you have strayed too far from that wholeness, when you have ignored its messages for too long, it will find you in the only place it can. In the silence. In the darkness. In the hours when there is nothing left to distract you from yourself. You have felt this, have you not? The way those nighttime awakenings carry a quality that daytime worries never possess. There is something almost sacred about them, something that feels simultaneously terrifying and necessary. The thoughts that come to you at 4 in the morning are not the same thoughts that come to you at 4 in the afternoon. They are deeper. Stranger, more honest. And that is precisely why they frighten you. What I want to share with you today is not a cure for those awakenings. I am not going to give you tips for falling back asleep or techniques for shutting down your nighttime mind. What I want to do is far more important than that. I want to help you understand what your psyche is actually trying to tell you in those hours. I want to help you learn to listen in a way that most people never will. Because the truth is this: those pre-dawn hours contain information about yourself that you cannot access any other way. And if you learn to receive those messages instead of fighting them, something inside you will begin to shift in ways you cannot yet imagine. There is a reason you are here watching this. And There is a reason you woke up at 3:47 last night, or last week, or for the past 6 months. Your unconscious has been trying to get your attention. Let us finally discover what it needs you to know. The first thing I need you to understand is that this pattern of nighttime awakening is not new to you. It may feel like it started recently. Maybe you can trace it back to a specific event, a job loss, a heartbreak, a death in the family, a move to a new city. But if you look more honestly at your history, you will likely discover that this visitation from the unconscious has been happening in some form or another for much longer than you realized. I once spoke with a man in his early 50s who came to me because he had been waking every night at exactly 3:15 for nearly 2 years. He was exhausted. His marriage was suffering. His work was declining. He had tried everything: sleep medications, meditation apps, white noise machines, blackout curtains. Nothing worked. The awakening came like clockwork, pulling him from sleep into that strange alert darkness that felt almost electric in its intensity. When I asked him what thoughts came to him during those hours, he looked away. He was silent for a long moment. Then he told me something he had never told anyone. He said that every night at 3:15, he found himself thinking about his father who had died 15 years earlier. His father who he had not spoken to for the last 3 years of the man's life. His father who he had never forgiven, and who had never forgiven him. He told me that during the day, he never thought about his father. He had made peace with it, he said. He had moved on. The past was the past. But at 3:15 in the morning, peace was nowhere to be found. At 3:15, the wound was as fresh as the day of the funeral, when he had stood at the back of the room and felt nothing except a terrible hollow space where grief should have been. What I told him, and what I am telling you now, is that the unconscious does not forget. It cannot forget. It holds everything you have ever experienced, everything you have ever felt, everything you have ever pushed down and locked away, because feeling it was too dangerous or too painful or too inconvenient. And when you are awake during the day, your ego is strong enough to keep those memories and feelings at bay. Your defenses are up. Your distractions are plentiful. You have work to do, people to see, a persona to maintain. But at 3 in the morning, those defenses crumble. The ego, exhausted from its daytime performance, loosens its grip. And in that moment, whatever you have been avoiding finds its way to the surface. Jung called this the return of the repressed, though his understanding of it went far deeper than the Freudian concept. For Jung, what returns to us in those nighttime hours is not merely traumatic memory. It is the unlived life. It is the parts of ourselves we have abandoned. It is the future we were meant to live but have been too afraid to claim. That man who woke at 3:15 did not merely need to grieve his father. He needed to confront the part of himself that had become exactly like his father, cold, withholding, incapable of vulnerability. He needed to face the truth that he was doing to his own children what his father had done to him. The pre-dawn awakening was not a problem to be solved. It was a summons. His psyche was demanding that he do the work he had been avoiding for 15 years. This is what I mean when I say that your nighttime awakenings are not symptoms. They are messages. And the content of those messages, if you have the courage to receive them, will tell you everything you need to know about what work your soul requires. There is a pattern I have noticed in people who experience this phenomenon, and I wonder if you will recognize yourself in it. During the day, they are competent. They are productive. They hold themselves together with a strength that impresses everyone around them. They are the people others rely on, the ones who seem to have their lives in order, the ones who rarely complain and never break down. But at night, in those silent hours, a different person emerges. Someone frightened, someone lost, someone who does not know who they are anymore. This split between the daytime self and the nighttime self is not a flaw in your character. It is a signal of something Jung considered essential to the work of becoming whole. He called it the shadow. The shadow is not, as popular culture would have you believe, simply the dark side of your personality. It is not merely your rage, your jealousy, your capacity for cruelty. The shadow is everything you have rejected about yourself in order to become who you think you should be. It contains your darkness, yes, but it also contains your light. It contains the dreams you abandoned, the talents you suppressed, the loves you denied, the truths you swallowed. The shadow is the unlived life, and it does not disappear simply because you refuse to look at it. It waits. And in those hours between 3 and 5, when the ego finally sleeps even though the body does not, the shadow rises. Jung once wrote something that I return to again and again when I think about this phenomenon. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Read that again if you need to. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What he means is that the patterns you cannot see are the patterns that control you. The wounds you refuse to acknowledge are the wounds that shape every relationship, every decision, every moment of your life. And when you wake at 3:47 in the morning with a feeling you cannot name and a dread you cannot explain, what you are experiencing is the unconscious attempting to make itself known. It is trying to show you the very things you have spent your waking life avoiding. The question is not, how do I stop waking up at night? The question is, what am I being asked to see? I remember when I first truly understood this principle. For years, I had been waking in the early morning hours with a feeling of profound wrongness. Not about any specific thing, just a pervasive sense that something in my life was fundamentally off course. I tried to fix it by changing external circumstances. I changed jobs. I changed cities. I changed relationships. And still the feeling came night after night, that hollow knowing that I was living someone else's life. It was only when I began to engage with those nighttime hours differently, when I stopped fighting the awakening and started asking what it wanted, that the message became clear. I had spent decades building a life that looked successful from the outside, but felt dead from the inside. I had become the person my parents wanted me to be, the person society rewarded, the person who checked all the right boxes. But somewhere along the way, I had lost contact with who I actually was. The night waking was my psyche's way of screaming what my daytime self refused to whisper. This is not your life. You have forgotten yourself. Perhaps this resonates with you. Perhaps you have built something impressive that leaves you feeling empty. Perhaps you have achieved what you set out to achieve, only to discover that the achievement means nothing, that you reach the top of the ladder and find it leaning against the wrong wall. Or perhaps it is something different for you. Perhaps the nighttime message is about a relationship you are afraid to leave, or a relationship you are afraid to fully enter. Perhaps it is about a creative gift you have been suppressing, or a truth you have been hiding, or a grief you have been refusing to feel. Whatever the specific content, the structure is always the same. Something essential has been pushed into the shadow. Something true about who you are has been denied. And the pre-dawn hours are when that truth forces its way back into consciousness, demanding to be witnessed, demanding to be integrated, demanding to be lived. I want you to think about the last time you woke between 3 and 5 in the morning. Not to analyze it intellectually, but to actually put yourself back in that moment. Feel the darkness of the room. Feel the weight of the silence. Feel the strange, alert quality of your own consciousness. That sense of being utterly awake in a world that is completely asleep. Now, I want you to remember what thoughts came to you in that moment. Not the surface thoughts, not the to-do lists and worries about tomorrow. I mean the deeper ones. The ones that feel almost dangerous to think during the day. the ones about the life you are not living, the ones about the person you have not become, the ones about the love you do not feel or the love you feel for someone you should not, the ones about the way you are wasting this one precious existence, the ones that make you feel so alone you could scream into the silence. Those thoughts are not intrusive disturbances. They are visitors from the deepest part of yourself, and they have something to tell you that your waking mind is not ready to hear. There is an ancient concept, found in nearly every spiritual tradition, of the dark night of the soul. St. John of the Cross wrote about it in the 16th century, describing a period of spiritual desolation that the soul must pass through on its way to union with the divine. But Jung understood this concept psychologically. He saw that every person who undertakes the journey of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, must pass through a period of darkness, a period where the old self dies, the new self has not yet been born, a period where you feel lost, unmoored, stripped of the identities and beliefs that once gave your life meaning. I believe, and I have seen this confirmed again and again, that the pre-dawn awakening is often a sign that you are entering or already inside this dark night. Your psyche is restructuring itself. The person you were is dying, and the person you are becoming has not yet emerged. And that transition, that death and rebirth, happens in the darkness. It happens when you are alone with nothing but your own consciousness and the silence that surrounds it. If this is what is happening to you, I want you to know that it is not a disorder. It is not something to medicate away or distract yourself from. It is something to move through, consciously, bravely, with full awareness of what is being asked of you. The first thing you must do is stop resisting the awakening. I know this sounds counterintuitive. Every instinct tells you to fight it, to force yourself back to sleep, to reach for the phone or the sleeping pills or the nightcap that promises oblivion. But the resistance is precisely what makes the experience so painful. What you resist persists. What you refuse to look at grows stronger. What you run from will chase you. Instead, when you find yourself awake at 3:47, I want you to try something different. Instead of fighting the wakefulness, I want you to welcome it. Not with forced positivity, not with some false spiritual gratitude, but with simple acceptance. You are awake. This is happening. Something inside you has chosen this moment to speak, and now you have a choice. You can keep running, or you can finally turn and face what has been following you. Jung had a practice he called active imagination. It was a method for engaging directly with the contents of the unconscious, for meeting the figures that appear in our dreams and fantasies, and dialoguing with them as if they were real entities with their own intelligence and intention. I have adapted this practice specifically for the experience of nighttime awakening, and I want to share it with you now. When you wake in those pre-dawn hours, instead of immediately trying to fall back asleep, allow yourself to be present with whatever arises. Do not reach for the phone. Do not turn on the light. Simply lie there in the darkness and notice what comes. What emotions are present? What thoughts arise? If there were a figure in the room representing whatever is waking you, what would it look like? What would it say? This might sound strange. It might sound like too much to ask when you're exhausted and desperate for rest. But I promise you that this practice, done consistently, will transform your relationship with those nighttime hours. You will begin to receive information you cannot access any other way. You will begin to understand yourself at a depth you did not know was possible. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the awakenings will change. Not because they stop happening, but because they are no longer terrifying. They become a meeting with yourself. They become a homecoming. There's a story I want to tell you. It is a story from ancient Greek mythology, but it speaks directly to what we are discussing. The story is about Orpheus, the musician whose songs were so beautiful they could charm the trees and stones. who descended into the underworld to retrieve his dead wife, Eurydice. You probably know the outline of the story. You know that Hades agreed to let Eurydice return to the land of the living, on one condition. Orpheus must walk out of the underworld without looking back. He must trust that she was behind him without turning to verify her presence. And you know what happened. At the very last moment, just before they reached the surface, Orpheus looked back. He could not bear the uncertainty. He could not trust the unseen. And, in that moment of looking back, Eurydice vanished forever. What you might not know is how this story relates to the night waking phenomenon and the work it is asking you to do. Here is what I see in this myth. The underworld is the unconscious. Eurydice is the lost part of yourself, the piece of your soul that has been living in the shadows, because you cannot find a way to integrate it into your waking life. And the journey out of the underworld, the journey from darkness into light, is the process of bringing what is unconscious into consciousness. It is the very work the 3 a.m. awakening is inviting you to do. But here's the crucial point. Orpheus fails because he cannot tolerate the uncertainty of the journey. He cannot walk in the darkness without knowing for certain what is behind him. He demands proof before the process is complete. And, in demanding that proof, he loses everything. The same dynamic plays out in our relationship with the unconscious. We want to understand before we experience. We want the insight before we have done the work. We want to know why we are waking at 3 a.m. before we have been willing to actually sit with the experience and let it teach us. And in that impatience, in that demand for premature clarity, we lose access to the very thing we seek. Jung wrote that the experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego. What he meant is that the deeper wisdom you carry cannot be accessed through the ego's usual methods of analysis and control. The ego wants answers. The self offers presence. The ego wants to fix the problem. The self wants to transform the person who has the problem. And that transformation cannot happen on the ego's schedule or according to the ego's plan. It happens in the darkness. It happens in the uncertainty. It happens when you are willing to walk without looking back, trusting that what you seek is following you, even when you cannot see it. If you are recognizing yourself in what I am describing, if these words are landing somewhere deeper than your intellect, I want you to do something. I want you to leave one word in the comments below. Awake, not as a casual engagement with a video, but as a marker for yourself. Let it be an acknowledgement that you are ready to stop fighting what is happening in those nighttime hours and to start listening. Maybe for you, the nighttime message is about anger. Not the petty frustrations of daily life, but a deeper rage you have been swallowing since childhood. Maybe you were taught that anger was unacceptable, that good people do not get angry, that your job was to keep the peace no matter what it cost you. And now, at 3 a.m, that anger rises. It has nowhere else to go. It has been locked away so long that it does not even know how to express itself. It just sits in your chest, this heavy burning presence that makes sleep impossible. Or maybe for you the message is about grief. Not fresh grief, but old grief. Ancient grief. Grief for losses that happened so long ago you thought you had processed them. Grief for the parent who was never really there, even when they were physically present. Grief for the childhood that was not safe. Grief for the person you were before life taught you to armor yourself. This grief does not surface during the day, because during the day you are too busy surviving to feel it. But at 4 a.m, when the survival mechanisms finally rest, the grief rises like water, finding its own level. Perhaps the message is about a secret you are keeping, something you have never told another living soul, something you did, or something that was done to you. something that feels too shameful or too strange or too dangerous to speak aloud. During the day, you can pretend the secret does not exist. You can push it so far down that you almost forget it is there. But the unconscious does not forget. And at 3:33 in the morning, the secret announces itself in the form of an awakening you cannot explain. Or perhaps the message is about desire, a desire so forbidden that you have not even allowed yourself to fully feel it. A desire for a different life, a different partner, a different identity. A desire to create something, to leave something, to become someone who terrifies you with their audacity. During the day, duty and practicality and fear of judgment keep this desire locked away. But at night, when the judges are sleeping, the desire escapes its cage and demands to be acknowledged. I cannot tell you what your specific message is. That is yours to discover. But I can tell you this. Whatever rises in those pre-dawn hours is not random. It is precise. It is chosen. It is the exact content that needs to be integrated for you to become whole. And if you keep pushing it away, if you keep reaching for the distractions and the medications, and the desperate attempts to return to unconsciousness, the message will not disappear. It will only grow louder. It will find other ways to get your attention. Symptoms will develop in your body. Patterns will repeat in your relationships. Crises will erupt in your life. Because what wants to be conscious will become conscious one way or another. The only question is whether you will participate in the process or be dragged through it. There is a way to work with this. There is a way to receive the nighttime messages and integrate them into your waking life. It is not a technique in the mechanical sense. It is more like a stance, a way of being in relationship with your own depths. And I want to walk you through it now, not as a series of steps, but as a continuous unfolding that you can begin to practice tonight and every night that you find yourself awake in those sacred hours. The first thing to understand is that the unconscious speaks in images and feelings, not in words and logic. When you wake at 3 a.m., your mind will immediately try to translate the experience into language. It will generate narratives and explanations. It will say, you are anxious about the presentation next week, or worried about money or upset about what your partner said last Tuesday. These explanations are not necessarily wrong, but they are almost always incomplete. They are the ego's attempt to domesticate something wild, to make sense of something that operates beyond sense. Instead of accepting the first explanation that arises, I want you to drop beneath the narrative and into the body. What are you actually feeling? Not what are you thinking, but what is the felt sense of this experience? Is there tightness in your chest? Heaviness in your belly? A hollow ache behind your sternum? Stay with the physical sensation without trying to interpret it. Let it be what it is, without demanding that it explain itself. Jung understood that the body is the unconscious made visible. What we cannot feel emotionally will manifest physically. What we cannot speak will find expression in symptom and sensation. By attending to the body in those nighttime hours, you are opening a direct channel to the unconscious contents that are trying to emerge. The second thing to practice is receptivity. This is harder than it sounds. The ego's default mode is active. It wants to fix, to solve, to manage, to control. But the unconscious cannot be controlled. It can only be received. Think of it like this. You cannot force a dream to come. You can only create the conditions for dreaming and then surrender to whatever arises. The same is true for the messages that come in the pre-dawn hours. You cannot demand that they reveal themselves. You can only become still enough, open enough, humble enough to receive what they offer. This means giving up the need to understand immediately. It means allowing confusion. It means tolerating the discomfort of not knowing. There is a quote from the poet Rilke that I think Jung would have loved. He wrote, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. This is exactly the stance required for working with nighttime awakenings. You do not need to answer the questions that arise at 3 a.m. You need to love them. You need to let them work on you, shape you, change you over time. The third practice is dialogue. This is where active imagination becomes most powerful. When you sense what it is that is waking you, when you get even a vague sense of the presence that is demanding your attention, you can begin to speak with it. Not out loud if that does not feel right, but internally. With genuine curiosity. You might say something like, "I feel you here. I know you want something from me. I am listening. What do you need me to know?" This might sound strange, speaking to parts of yourself as if they were separate entities. But this is precisely how the psyche is structured. We are not singular unified beings. We are multiplicities. There are many selves within the self, many voices, many figures, each with its own desires and fears and wisdom. Jung called these complexes, and he saw them not as pathology, but as natural features of the psyche. The problem is not that we have complexes. The problem is that we are unconscious of them, that they run our lives from behind the curtain while we believe we are the ones in control. When you dialogue with what wakes you at night, you are taking back the power that has been operating outside your awareness. You are meeting the complex face to face. You are inviting it into consciousness. And when you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. The complex begins to transform. What was once a source of suffering becomes a source of strength. The wound becomes the teacher. I want to tell you about what happened to a woman I knew, someone who had been waking at 4 a.m. for over a year. She was a successful professional, respected in her field, admired by her colleagues. From the outside, her life looked enviable. From the inside, she was dying. Every night at 4, she would wake with a feeling she described as being crushed, as if something heavy was sitting on her chest, as if she was suffocating under a weight she could not see. She tried everything to make it stop. Doctors found nothing wrong with her physically. Therapists helped her manage her anxiety, but could not touch the root of the experience. She was beginning to think she would live with this feeling forever. When she learned to dialogue with what was waking her, something extraordinary happened. She began to sense a presence in the darkness, a figure that at first seemed threatening but gradually revealed itself to be something else entirely. It was a part of herself she had abandoned decades earlier. The girl she had been before she learned to perform. The girl who was wild and creative and free before life taught her to be acceptable. That girl had been suffocating for 30 years, pushed down and locked away while the professional persona flourished. And at 4 a.m, she was demanding to breathe. The woman did not heal overnight. The process took years. But something shifted fundamentally when she stopped fighting the nighttime awakening and started meeting what was there. She made space in her life for creativity, something she had not allowed herself in decades. She started painting, badly at first, then with increasing freedom and joy. She began to say no to things that drained her, even when saying no was professionally costly. She started to live, for the first time since childhood, according to her own authentic desires. The last time I spoke with her, she still woke sometimes at 4 a.m, but the quality had completely changed. The crushing sensation was gone. In its place was something she could only describe as a kind of intimate tenderness. The nighttime hours had become a time of communion with herself, a space where she and her abandoned parts could simply be together, healing in the darkness. This is what is possible for you. Not the elimination of the awakening, but its transformation. Not the silencing of the voice, but learning to hear what it has been trying to say all along. If this is landing for you, if you are feeling something shift as you listen, I want you to share this with someone. Not because I need the views, but because somewhere in your life there is a person who is going through their own version of this. Someone who wakes at 3 in the morning and thinks they are broken. Someone who needs to hear that the darkness they are experiencing is not a malfunction, but an invitation. Send this to that person. Not with a message that says, you should watch this, but with something simpler. Maybe just, this made me think of you. Let them know they are not alone in the dark. There is something else I need to tell you. Something about what waits on the other side of this work. Because I do not want you to think that engaging with your nighttime awakenings is only about suffering, only about confronting what is painful and unresolved. The shadow does not contain only your wounds. It also contains your gold. This was one of Jung's most radical insights. He saw that we repress not only our darkness but also our light. We push down not only our rage and grief and fear, but also our brilliance, our creativity, our capacity for joy, our potential greatness. We do this because light can be as threatening as darkness. To shine fully is to be visible. To be visible is to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable is to risk rejection, criticism, failure. And so we dim ourselves. We make ourselves smaller. We hide our gifts even from ourselves. When you begin to work with what wakes you at night, you will not only encounter old pain, you will also encounter old dreams. You will meet the version of yourself that you sacrificed on the altar of practicality. You will rediscover talents you forgot you had. You will remember desires you convinced yourself were foolish or impossible. The integration of the shadow is not a descent into darkness. It is a retrieval of everything that makes you fully alive. I think about this often when I consider the people I have worked with over the years, the people who have done this work of nighttime dialogue and shadow integration. The common pattern is not that they become more comfortable or more adjusted. They become more themselves, more alive, more willing to take risks, to speak truth, to pursue what matters to them regardless of what others think. The armor falls away. The persona loosens its grip, and what emerges is not the perfect person, but the real person, imperfect and messy and gloriously authentic. Jung had a word for this process. He called it individuation, and he considered it the central task of human life. Not success, not happiness, not comfort. Individuation. The process of becoming who you were meant to be before the world told you who you should be. The process of integrating all the scattered and rejected pieces of yourself into a living whole. The process that begins, often, with an unexplained awakening at 3 in the morning. There is a quote from Jung that has stayed with me for years. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." When I first read those words, they struck me as almost too simple. Of course we want to become who we truly are. Who would not want that? But over time I have come to understand the weight of that statement. Becoming who you truly are is not simple at all. It requires confronting everything you have hidden. It requires mourning the lives you did not live. It requires dying to who you thought you were in order to be reborn as who you actually are. It is the hardest work there is. And it is the only work that finally matters. If you are waking between 3 and 5 in the morning, you are being called to this work. Not invited. Called. There is a difference. An invitation can be declined politely. A calling will not take no for an answer. It will return night after night, year after year, lifetime after lifetime if necessary, until you finally respond. I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine that you are sitting in a room somewhere ordinary, maybe your kitchen table, maybe a park bench in a city you love. It is early morning. The sun has not quite risen. The world is quiet in that way it gets before the day begins, and you are sitting there with a feeling you have not felt in years. Perhaps you have never felt it. It is not happiness exactly. Happiness comes and goes. This is something steadier, something that does not depend on circumstances. You might call it peace, though that word has been so overused it has almost lost its meaning. You might call it presence, though that too sounds like a concept more than an experience. What it actually feels like is this: you are here, fully here, not wishing you were somewhere else, not replaying the past, not rehearsing the future. Just here in this moment, in this body, alive. And somewhere beneath that presence is a knowledge, a quiet certainty that you are living your life, not someone else's life, not the life your parents wanted for you, not the life society told you to want, your life, the one that was waiting for you all along beneath the layers of conditioning and fear and performance. This is what waits on the other side of the night work. This is what becomes possible when you stop running from what wakes you and start listening to it. Not a perfect life, free from difficulty, but a real life that is actually yours. A life where the pre-dawn hours are no longer a torment, but a treasure. A sacred time when you meet the deepest parts of yourself in the silence and darkness that once felt like enemies. I do not promise that this will happen quickly. The psyche has its own timeline, and it is usually slower than the ego would like. The wounds you have been avoiding may have been avoided for good reason, and meeting them requires building strength and capacity over time. But I do promise that every moment you spend in genuine dialogue with what wakes you at night is a moment that moves you closer to wholeness. Every night you choose presence over avoidance is a night that changes you in ways you cannot yet see. There is a story told about Jung in his later years. A student asked him what advice he would give to someone beginning the journey of individuation. Jung was silent for a long moment. Then he said something unexpected. He said, "Learn to live the questions." Not answer the questions. Live them. Let them work on you. Let them shape you. Do not rush to resolve the mystery of yourself, because the mystery is not a problem to be solved. It is a depth to be explored. It is a relationship to be developed over the course of a lifetime. This is what I am asking you to do with your nighttime awakenings. Stop trying to solve them. Start living them. Let them be your teachers. Let them show you what you are hiding from yourself. Let them invite you into the depths of your own being, depths you did not know existed, depths that contain everything you need to become who you truly are. Remember the image I began with. The moment when your eyes open suddenly at 3:47 in the morning. The silence. The darkness. The strange alertness that feels almost electric. I told you at the beginning that something was waiting for you in that moment. That your unconscious had chosen the only time when you were quiet enough to listen. Now I want to revise that image slightly, because after everything we have explored together, I think you can see it differently now. When you wake at that hour, you are not being visited by something separate from yourself. You are being visited by yourself, by the parts of you that have been waiting, some of them patiently, some of them desperately, for you to finally turn toward them. The night is not your enemy. It is your invitation. The wakefulness is not a problem. It is a doorway. What waits on the other side of that doorway is nothing less than your own life. Not the life you have been living, perhaps, but the life you were meant to live. The life that your soul chose before the world taught you to fear it. Jung wrote in his Red Book, a text he worked on in secrecy for decades, the words that I believe speak directly to what we have been exploring. He wrote, "The way is not without danger. Everything good is costly, and the development of personality is one of the most costly of all things. It requires isolation, loneliness, and a willingness to be misunderstood. This is the truth of the path I am inviting you onto. It is not easy. The nighttime hours will not suddenly become comfortable. The confrontation with what you have been avoiding will not be painless. There will be times when you wonder if you have made a terrible mistake, times when the darkness seems endless, times when you doubt whether the dawn will ever come. But I want you to know, from someone who has walked this path and continues to walk it, that the dawn does come. Not as a sudden revelation, not as a blinding flash of enlightenment, but as a gradual lightening. A slow realization that you are not the same person you were when you started. A quiet recognition that the thing you were so afraid of has become a gift. That the wound has become the teacher. That the darkness was not the enemy of the light, but its birthplace. This is the promise of the pre-dawn awakening. Not that the suffering will end, but that the suffering will mean something. Not that you will find easy answers, but that you will become someone capable of holding the questions. Not that the night will disappear, but that you will learn to love the night, because it is in the night that you finally meet yourself. Before I leave you, I want you to do one more thing. In the comments below, type these words, "I am ready to listen," not as an empty affirmation, not as something you hope might be true. Say it as a declaration. Say it as the first step on a journey that will change everything about how you live. And then tonight, when you wake at 3:47 or 4:12 or 3:33, remember what we have explored together. Remember that you are not broken. Remember that something is trying to reach you. Remember that the silence and darkness are not enemies, but allies. And instead of fighting your way back to sleep, lie there for a moment in the quiet. Take a breath and say, silently or loud, "I am here. I am listening. What do you need me to know?" The psyche is patient, but it is also persistent. It has been waking you for a reason. It has been waiting for this moment, the moment when you finally decided to stop running and start listening. And now that you have decided, now that you are here, now that you are ready, the real work can begin. What you find in those pre-dawn hours will not be what you expected. It never is. But it will be exactly what you need. It will be the missing piece, the lost part, the abandoned self, the forgotten dream. It will be you waiting to come home. The night is not your enemy. It never was. The night is your oldest friend, the one who has been keeping vigil all these years,